Welcome back to the Notary Lowercase Alphabet Crochet series, where we crochet every single letter of the alphabet, one tutorial at a time. Today, we're making lowercase d, and this is episode 4 of the series. If you're just joining us, welcome. You can find the tutorials for lowercase a, b, and c in the description below. I recommend starting there so you're familiar with the techniques before we get into today's letter. If you already know the basics, I'll have timestamps in the description so you can skip straight to the part that you need. Before we start, let's quickly get familiar with the parts of your crochet hook so everything makes sense as we go. At the very top, we have the head. This is the curved, pointed part of the hook. It's what catches the yarn and pulls it through your stitches. And then just below the head is the throat. This is the narrow dip where the yarn sits before it gets pulled through a loop. Think of it as the resting place for your yarn between movements. Then we have the shaft. The shaft is the long, straight section of the hook. This is really important because we use the shaft to measure our loop size and to keep our tension consistent. We'll come back to this when we talk about tension in just a moment. And finally, we have the handle. This is the part you hold while you work. Some hooks have a simpler handle and others are more economic. Others are padded or shaped for comfort. Use whichever feels best in your hand. Now that we know our hook, we are ready to start. Every crochet project begins the same way, with a slip knot. A slip knot is simply our starting point. It anchors the yarn onto the hook so we can begin building our foundation. Now to make a slip knot, you take the tail end of your yarn. That's the short end. You wrap it around the index finger of your non-dominant hand to form a loop. If you're right-handed, the long end of the yarn should be on the left and the short end on the right. If you're left-handed, then it's the opposite. Now, you pinch where the yarn crosses using your non-dominant hand's thumb and index finger. This holds your loop in place. Take the short end of the yarn with your dominant hand and bring it behind the loop so it sits vertically in the center. Then you use your dominant hand's thumb and index finger to grab that strand from inside the loop and pull it through. Gently pull both ends of the yarn to tighten it into a knot. Not too tight though. You still want it to slide on your hook. Before we make our first stitch, we need to talk about tension, because tension is what keeps your stitches even and your finished project looking clean. Now, how do we hold our yarn for tension? Take the short tail of the yarn with your dominant hand. Thread the yarn between your non-dominant hand's thumb and index finger from the inside of your hand through to the back. Then wrap the yarn around your index finger. Hold the slip knot between your non-dominant hand's thumb and middle finger with the long end pinched between your palm and your pinky finger. Now here's how we keep our tension consistent while we work. With your hook inside the working loop is the loop that's currently on your hook. Pull the yarn with your non-dominant hand's index finger to make the loop smaller. Pull the loop with your hook to make it larger. We use the shaft of the hook to check our loop size. Remember the shaft? The shaft is that long straight section between the head and the handle. Slide the shaft through the working loop. If the loop fits comfortably along the shaft right up to the throat without being too tight or too loose, then your tension is just right. Do this before every new row if you're not sure. It only takes a second, but it makes a big difference. Now we're going to make our foundation chain. This is the base of our project. It's the row of loops we'll work our first stitches into. My foundation chain method is slightly different from what you might have seen before, but it creates a much steadier, more even base. Stick with me and I'll show you exactly how. Start with your slip knot and set your hook into the slip knot. Then with your non-dominant hand, hold the short tail of the yarn. Now bring the yarn over your hook from front to back. You'll now have 2 loops in your hook. Pinch those 2 loops together with your dominant hand's index finger to secure them, but make sure the loops can still slide up and down the hook. Now pick up the long end of the yarn, place it over the hook and pull it through the loop on your hook. That is 1 foundation stitch. Repeat this for all chains except the very last one. For the last chain only, we do something slightly different. Instead of the foundation technique, simply yarn over the hook from back to front and then pull through the loop on your hook. This closes and secures your foundation row. Once your foundation chain is complete, we need to find the correct side to start working into, because the foundation technique creates a chain with multiple sides, which can be a little confusing at first. So to find the right side, you put your hook down for a moment. Then you gently pull the working loop. Remember that the working loop is the loop that's right at the end of your chain. So you'll gently pull the loop with your fingers to extend it slightly. Hold the base of your foundation chain with your other hand. The base is the point where you start your very first chain. Now rotate your foundation chain until the working loop is positioned exactly in line with the tops of the stitches. You'll notice that the foundation chain now shows a row of small V shapes from the bottom all the way up to the working loop. Those V shapes are your stitches. That is what we work into. For row 1, we always skip the first chain. Always. I'll show you exactly why at the end of row 1. Skip the first chain and start your first stitch in the second chain from your hook. Now we're going to learn our most important stitch, the single crochet. This is the stitch we'll use for most of this project. To make a single crochet, insert your hook into the working stitch. With your non-dominant hand, pick up the yarn and place it under the hook. This is what we call yarn under. To guide the yarn under the hook from back to front. Now pull the yarn through the working stitch with your hook. At this point, you'll have 2 loops on your hook. Pick up the yarn again with your non-dominant hand, but this time place the yarn over the hook. This is yarn over. Pull the yarn through both loops on your hook. You should now have 1 loop remaining. That is 1 complete single crochet. Now we demonstrate how we do an increase. An increase is simply 2 single crochets that are worked into the same stitch. We use increases to add extra stitches and gradually shape our work. To make an increase, complete a single crochet in the working stitch as normal. Then, without moving to the next stitch, you go back into the same stitch and complete a second single crochet. 2 single crochets in 1 stitch. That is your increase. Alright, so now we are ready to start with our pattern. Our lowercase d is made in several parts that we join together, so don't worry if it doesn't look like a letter yet. So we'll start by making a slip knot and working our foundation chain of 5 chains. Remember, 4 chains using the foundation technique, and the 5th and last chain we use the standard yarn over back to front. Before we start with row 1, I would like to remind you to always place your stitch marker at the very first stitch of every row. A stitch marker is a small tool, something like a little clip or a safety pin. It marks a specific stitch so you don't lose your place. We'll be using it at the beginning of every single row throughout this pattern. Okay, so for the first row, we'll be working in the back loop only. Let me explain what that means. Every stitch has 2 loops sitting at the top, like a little V shape. The front loop is the strand that is closest to you. The back loop is the strand that is furthest from you. When we work in the back loop only, we skip the front loop completely and insert our hook only into that back strand. the strand that is furthest from us. We will use BLO for back loop only and FLO for front loop only at different points in this pattern. I'll always tell you which one we are using. So to start with our row 1, we skip the first chain, then we start in the second chain. Remember, we are working in the back loop only. We do 1 increase, add our stitch marker to the very first stitch of our row. Then we do 2 single crochets, two increases, two single crochets, and 1 increase. You should have 12 stitches by the end of row 1. Now back to why we always skip the first stitch when starting with the first row after a foundation base. I'll show you what happens when we don't skip the first chain. You'll notice it doesn't work. It either unravels or it falls apart. And that is the reason. Now moving on to row 2. Remember to place your stitch marker on the first stitch of every new row. The pattern for row 2 is 1 single crochet, one increase, two single crochet, one increase, two single crochet, one increase, 2 single crochet, 1 increase, and 1 single crochet. You should have 16 stitches by the end of row 2. Now we do row 3. The pattern for row 3 is just 1 single crochet. After that single crochet, we cut our yarn. Now we are done with part 1. We set it aside. Now we start with part 2. Part 2 is the rounder, larger section of our lowercase d. To start, we make a slip knot and then we work our foundation chain of 6 chains. Remember, 5 chains using the foundation technique and the 6th and last chain using the standard yarn over back to front. Now with row 1, we will also be doing back loop only. Remember that back loop only is the strand that is furthest from you. You skip the first chain and then working in the back loop only, we follow this pattern. 1 increase, 3 single crochets, two increases, three single crochets, one increase. You should have 14 stitches by the end of row 1, part 2. The pattern for row 2, part 2 is as follows. 2 increases, 3 single crochets, 4 increases, 3 single crochets, 2 increases. You should have 22 stitches by the end of this row. Now for row 3 of part 2, the pattern is as follows: 1 single crochet, 1 increase, 7 single crochets, 1 increase, 2 single crochets, 1 increase, 7 single crochets, 1 increase, 1 single crochet. You should have 26 stitches by the end of this row. That is our part 2 done. Next, we do part 3. Part 3 is us joining part 1 and part 2 together to start building the shape of our lowercase d. To start with part 3, we need to backtrack just a little bit. Remember the part 1 that we set aside? If you remember, we finished part 1 on row 3. But if you notice, row 3 was incomplete as we only did 1 single crochet. So to complete row 3, we are going to merge row 3 of part 1 into row 3 of part 2. To do that, we join from the last stitch of row 3 part 2. straight to the second stitch of row 3, part 1. Then we work 16 single crochets across part 1. You should have 42 single crochets across both parts by the end of row 3, part 3. Next, we do row 4. Row 4 is 42 single crochets across the row. Next is row 5. For row 5, we do 12 single crochets, two increases, (28) single crochets. You should have 44 stitches by the end of this row. Then row 6 is 13 single crochets, two increases, and 29 single crochets. You should have 46 stitches by the end of row 6. And then row 7, row 8, and row 9, we do single crochets all the way around, 46 of them. So you'll have 46 stitches for each row from row 7 to row 9. Then we do row 10. In row 10, we are going to start by working 28 single crochets. When we reach the 28th stitch, then we stop and we place a stitch marker. So we're placing our stitch marker on stitch 28. After placing your stitch marker, then we'll continue with 18 more single crochets. You should have 46 stitches by the end of this row. Before we continue with part 4, we need to learn one more stitch, the slip stitch. A slip stitch is used to join stitches or move across the work without adding any height. Think of it as a connecting stitch. Now, how do we make a slip stitch? You start by inserting your hook into the working stitch. With your non-dominant hand, pick up the yarn and place it under the hook. Yarn under. Pull the yarn through the working stitch with your hook. You'll have 2 loops on your hook. Now, without stopping, pull that same loop straight through the loop that's already on your hook in one motion. You should have 1 loop remaining. That is a completed slip stitch. Now we can do part 4. To do part 4, we start with row 11. We start off by working 2 single crochets. Now insert your hook into the 3rd stitch and into stitch 28. Stitch 28 is the one that we marked earlier. Insert your hook into both these stitches at the same time. Then work your slip stitch through both stitches to join them together. This is what's going to create the characteristic shape of our lowercase d. And that's the straight line that connects to the round part. Do this for 3 stitches. You should have 3 slip stitches and then continue with 20 single crochets. Then you'll have done 25 stitches by the end of this row. Before we move on to our next part, we learn our next new stitch, the decrease. A decrease combines two stitches into one, which is how we reduce our stitch count and shape the letter. For this pattern, we are working in the front loop only for our decreases. To make a decrease, insert your hook into the front loop of the working stitch. You'll have two loops on your hook. Pinch the loop on the side of your non-dominant hand with your dominant hand's index finger to secure it, but make sure it can still slide up and down the hook. Next, insert your hook into the front loop of the next stitch as well. You'll now have 3 loops on your hook. Pick up your yarn and place it under the hook and pull through the first 2 loops. Then you'll have 2 loops remaining. Next, place the yarn over the hook and pull through the last 2 loops. You should have 1 loop remaining. That is 1 decrease. Now that we know how to make a decrease, we can proceed with the following rows. The pattern for row 12 is as follows: 1 decrease, 16 single crochets, 1 decrease. You should have 18 stitches in total by the end of row 12. Row 13 is 18 single crochets across the entire row. The pattern for row 14 is 1 single crochet, one increase, (15 single crochets), one increase. You should have 20 stitches in total at the end of row 14. For row 15, we do 1 single crochet, and then we do 3 chains. You might be wondering, how do I add a chain after a single crochet? I'll show you. After completing your single crochet, you should have just one loop on your hook. Now yarn over. Yarn over means wrap the yarn over your hook from back to front, and then pull that yarn through the loop on your hook. That's one chain. Repeat 2 more times to make 3 chains in total. Now you add your stuffing. Don't overstuff. You want the project to hold its shape. You don't want it to look like it's about to burst. Just a quick note before we continue. Most yarn balls have 2 ends, an inner end and an outer end. If your yarn has both ends available, we'll now continue with the end that we haven't used yet. If your yarn only has one end, cut your yarn and then leave about enough yarn to work 6 single crochets. How do you measure enough yarn to work 6 single crochets? You simply do 6 single crochets . And then you will cut your yarn at the end of those stitches. You will unravel those 6 stitches. You should be left with 3 chains still intact. Now we need to attach our yarn to a new stitch. This is how we start a new section without having to begin a whole new piece. To attach yarn, insert your hook into your working stitch. Pull the yarn through the loop with your hook, yarn over and pull through the loop again to create a chain. And that is how you attach new yarn on a new row. Remember row 10 where we placed our stitch marker at stitch 28? We are going back to that. Attach your yarn at stitch 29. That's the stitch that's right next to where we did our slip stitches in part 4, row 11. We will then continue with row 11. Start with a single crochet in the same stitch where you attached your yarn. Then work 19 more single crochets. Then you have 20 single crochets in total for row 11. For row 12, follow this pattern. 4 single crochets, one decrease, eight single crochets, one decrease, four single crochets, you should have 18 stitches by the end of row 12. Row 13, you do 18 single crochets across the row. Same with row 14, you do 18 single crochets across the row. Then you cut your yarn. Part 5 is now complete. Now we move on to part 6. In part 6, we are continuing from the 1 single crochet and 3 chains that we made in part 4, row 15. So we are picking up exactly where we left off there. You start off by working 2 single crochets. If you cut your yarn at the end of part 4, row 15, reattach it here. I will show you how. First, insert your hook into the working loop. Pull the yarn just enough that you can put your dominant hand's index finger through the loop. With your index finger inside the working loop, pull the loop. You'll notice that it passes through 2 other loops inside the working stitch. Push your hook through those 2 loops. Now pick up your new yarn. Hold it the same way you would at the start of a new project. With your non-dominant hand, place the short end of the yarn between your non-dominant hand's middle finger and thumb. Place the yarn over the hook from back to front and pull through the 2 loops. You'll have 1 chain left on your hook. Using that chain, work your next stitch. When you've completed the next stitch, pull the short tail of the old yarn to secure everything in place. After attaching your yarn, work 16 single crochets, then 3 single crochets into the chain loops, then 19 more single crochets across the joining section. You should have 44 stitches by the end of row 15. Row 16, 44 single crochets. Stitches 2, 3, and 4 are worked into the chain spaces. Row 17, 44 single crochets across the row. Row 18, 33 single crochets. Two decreases. Seven single crochets. You should have 42 stitches by the end of row 18. Now we start with part 7. Part 7 starts with row 19. The pattern for row 19 is as follows. 4 single crochets. Skip the next 18 stitches. Make sure to count every single stitch carefully. Thereafter, do 20 single crochets. You should have 24 stitches in total. Row 20. The pattern is as follows. 2 single crochets, two decreases, nine single crochet, one decrease, and 7 single crochets. You should have 21 stitches in total. Row 21, the pattern is as follows. 1 single crochet, 2 decreases, eight single crochets, one decrease, six single crochets, you should have 18 stitches in total by the end of row 21. And then the last row of this part, we do 12 single crochets. Leave a long tail for sewing and cut your yarn. Now we sew this section closed. To do that, thread your needle with the long tail you left. Insert your needle into the first front loop on the left side from the inside out. Remember, front loop only means we're only going through the front strand of each stitch, not both loops. Now insert your needle into the front loop of the stitch directly across on the right side, again from the inside out. Continue sewing back and forth through the front loops, pulling gently as you go to close the opening. Add more stuffing at this point if needed before closing completely. Now we go to the section we skipped earlier. Those 18 stitches that we skipped in row 19. Attach your yarn to the first skipped stitch using the method we learned. For rows 19 to 29, do single crochets all the way around. 18 stitches for each row. All 11 rows. Row 30 then with 12 single crochets. We sew this section closed the same way we did before, back and forth through the front loops only. Once closed, check the entire letter for any small gaps or opening. If you see any, simply sew them shut. Then weave in all your remaining yarn ends to finish. And that is our lowercase d, finished, stuffed, and fully shaped. We made it all the way through. If you enjoyed this tutorial, please give it a thumbs up. Subscribe so you don't miss the next letter. Also, make sure you check out the tutorials for lowercase a, b, and c. Thank you so much for watching and crocheting with me today. I'll see you on the next one.